This is an emergency transmission. Citizens of the world, please, make no mistake. The zombie apocalypse is near. Will you cower and hide, or join us and fight? We are Dezombified. So stay on point and watch your six.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Dezombified. Real Evil, Season 1, Episode 8. Can you believe we're up to 8 weeks of this already? Love it every minute of it. How's everybody doing tonight? Good to see you all here. Some familiar faces, some new people, some people that we know but haven't seen here before necessarily. Warrior Princess Dragon Kelchner, Maraid the Mermaid, Bansheeba, Chris Jarvis, the world's most dangerous gerbil milker, Rick Brab, your ex-husband, not my ex-husband, maybe your ex-husband. Anybody else? The Boggs official. Realities in perspective. Good to see you. And I think we are caught up. I'm caught up. Let me go ahead and bring in my other half, my better half, the body to my Clyde, the yin to my yang. Gemma Jade. Come on in, Gemma.
Hi, everybody. Dezombified.
Gemma in the house.
No. No need to applaud. Just throw treats. Mainly chocolate ones. Hi, Maraid. Cookie, Fear the Great White just popped in. Warrior Princess Dragon Kelcher, Rick Brab. Reality is in perspective. I'm only looking at the bottom of the screen, so if I missed you, I apologize, but I know Steve already said hi to everyone. The Boggs official, Bansheeba, your ex-husband, which I know is not my ex-husband because he will be nowhere near me. So the beginning intro music to this reminds me of... Yeah, it reminds me of that old Jason Friday the 13th video game for regular Nintendo.
It does.
Doesn't it? It's like, and you're like walking in like that pixelated walk trying to find the cabin Jason is in. I don't know.
I used to love that game.
How you doing? Guys, tonight we are talking Real Evil. I cannot believe it's our 8th week already. I was missing for episode 1, but yeah, been here.
You were here in spirit.
I was here in spirit, absolutely loving it. And tonight we decided to go full blown. Evil. We always go full blown evil, but we're talking about killer vampires, not vampire killers. People who actually thought they were vampires or gained the name vampire.
A bloodlust, a bloodthirst.
Yes.
Blood drinkers, the real deal, not some buddy that shops at Hot Topic and likes to pretend they're a vampire. These vampires do not sparkle.
I was just going to say, as much as I loved True Blood, and I got to admit, I'm Team Edward. I am a Twilight fanatic and True Blood fanatic to the point where I would buy the fake blood bags just because I thought it was cool. My sister, Carol Varick, just walked in. So let's get started with Fritz Haarman. Frederick Fritz Haarman, October 25th, 1879. So that makes him a Scorpio. And he died on April 15th, 1925. He was a notorious serial killer, but he was born in Hanover, Germany. And he's believed to be responsible for the murder of 27 boys and young men. He was a quiet kid, but he kind of shunned activities that other little boys would play with, would do, like play sports or, outside activities. He would prefer to stay inside and play with his sister's toys. He did very poorly academically. And at the age of 16, his parents enrolled him or convinced him to enroll in the military academy. And this is German, guys. I'm from North Jersey. English is like, we have our own. So New Breisach. He initially adapted to military life and he performed well as in training. But after 1 year in the academy, he began to have seizures and he was discharged for medical reasons. So he returned to Hanover and started working in a cigar factory. He was arrested in 1898. I don't know what kind of words I'm allowed to say. He was touching children, let's put it that way. And that's what he was arrested for in 1898. But a psychologist declared he was mentally unfit to stand trial, and he was sent to a mental institution indefinitely. But he escaped 6 months later from the mental institution and fled to Switzerland, where he worked for 2 years before returning to Germany. And after he returned to Germany, after escaping the mental institution where he was indefinitely put because he was, so messed up in the head for doing this to these children, he enlisted in the military again under an alias. But in 1902, he was again discharged for the seizures, but he was awarded a full military pension. And when he returned to live with his family, he started working in his father's small business. After an argument with his father, Ollie, he got into a violent fight with his father, and he was arrested and charged with assault and again sent for psychiatric evaluation. And this time, a doctor did not diagnose him as mentally unstable. A court discharged him, and he again returned to live with his family. And shortly after this, he attempted to open a small shop, but the business went bankrupt. So for the next decade, he lived as a petty thief, burglar, and con man, frequently arrested and served several short prison sentences. But he gradually began to establish a relationship with the Hanover police as an informant, largely as a means of redirection attention of the police from himself, because he was out doing all these horrible things. And he later admitted that the police began to view him as a reliable source of information regarding his own criminal network that he was distancing himself from. Steve, do you want to pick up, or do you want me to just keep?
Yeah, I'll continue on here. And just the surprising thing to me that he was just able to get out of those mental asylums. And this was a time,
he broke out and then got a full military pension.
But then afterwards, when they had him put back in again, they let him out.
Yep.
And you think about that, at least in America, this was a time when a family could have a daughter committed just because she wanted to date the wrong boy. So
yep, that's true. Or your wife simply because, she burned your dinner. Like it's a joke, but it's not. It was that serious. And they would lobotomize women for catching their husbands cheating and trying to leave. Or not taking the punch in the face the right way. It was terrible.
But then this guy could, just leave and go back in. He was well known as a black market butcher. He was popular. The people of his area, his friendliness and irresistibly affordable meat. But they found out later on that it was
human.
It was humans. By that time, 1919, Germany was in dire economic straits, and many families struggled to keep food on the table. So during that time, and then throughout the early 20s, Haarman spent a lot of his time around Hanover's train station, scouting for teenage boys. He'd coax them home with promises, food, and comfort. And this was a time right after the First World War that thousands of children were running away from home due to the post-war hardships. So he had plenty of victims to choose from.
Absolutely.
And after feeding these victims, giving them a meal and, a warm place, which he promised, then came the funny part, which wasn't too funny to them. Sort of like John Wayne Gacy and his trick. Haarman's trick was he would kill them by biting through their trachea in what he grotesquely called his love bite before molesting the dead bodies, shall we say. Then he would dismember them, grinding their flesh into sausage meat or chopping them into cutlets to be sold as beef work. And anything else that he couldn't use for that. Surprisingly, he didn't make hot dogs. I was going to say, he didn't make hot dogs or bologna, but he dumped the remains in the nearby river. For 6 years, the police, like you said, they turned a blind eye to him because he was one of their favorite informants. He not only was a bad guy, but he knew all the other bad guys and knew what they were into. Now, even though the official count is 24, some say 27, he's believed to have murdered over 50 boys, and often chosen by a pimp that he had taken up with and lived together as a couple with. And the pimp was jealous of some of the clothing that the boys had. So Haarman would take them, kill them, cut them up, sell the meat, and give the clothing to his lover, the pimp. or sell the clothing. Um, more and more parents, were becoming alarmed, figuring out that something was going on, that people's children, not just from Hanover, but all over that part of Germany, were going into Hanover and ended up missing. And soon there began to circulate a tale that there was a vampire of Hanover on the loose. And then finally, May of 1924, the police were pretty much forced to say, yeah, we've got a problem. And they turned their attention to Haarman when children discovered a skull on the banks of the river near where he lived. Now, after several more skulls and skeletons were found, the river lane was dragged, uncovering the bodies of at least 22 teenage boys or young men. Suddenly, the city of Hanover was in full-blown panic, and the suspicions turned to Hartman, thanks to his known reputation for bringing runaway boys to his apartment. Due to his status as a favored informant, though, the Hanover police were deemed unfit to investigate him. So two detectives, it's easy for me to say, from Berlin arrived on the scene to take over the investigation. At the time when they were shadowing, they observed him attacking a teenager in a dark corner of a train station. So they caught him red-handed, literally. He was thrown in jail. Then they went to search his apartment, and inside they found an absolute nightmarish scene. The walls and floor were stained all over with blood, and more than 100 pieces of victims' clothing were found. In custody, the vampire of Hanover, much feared as he was, he haunted kids' nightmares, and that of parents too. He was only too happy to confess to his crimes. When asked how many he had killed, he replied casually, 30, 40, I don't know.
The trachea biter.
Yeah, later he said it was probably more like between 50 and 70. Now, the police were only able to identify 27 of those victims. From 1923 to 1924 alone was when those 27 were from, and were unable to find the dozens of others. Haarman was charged with multiple counts of murder, and they set a trial date. In court, Haarman smoked cigars and insulted everyone present. Once, looking at a photo of one missing boy, he shouted at the boy's grieving father that he could never have had anything to do with that child, as it was far too ugly. So this is just a nasty individual anyway, and a murderer, and a blood drinker, and a trachea biter. And he was found guilty of the 24 of the 27 murders. I don't have any idea.
Just think about that for a second.
How
a
did he
trachea biter.
I mean, that's the skin, the windpipe, everything. Just bite it and rip it out with your teeth. But I don't know how he escaped 3 of those that he was charged with. But anyway, they found him guilty of the 24 of the 27 murders that he was charged with between that time, swiftly sentenced to be decapitated by guillotine. Kind of particularly fitting there, I think, on April 15th, 1925. Said his lover, Grans, who had often emotionally blackmailed Haarman into murdering particular children, was sentenced to life in prison, but then, no reason why, his sentence was later commuted to just 12 years.
You know what's kind of messed up about this too is after he did break out from the mental institution and cross the border to Switzerland, when he came back that 2 years later and tried to get back into the army under an alias, his father told on him. His father called the local police dozens of times and said he escaped. He's supposed to be locked up. He's going to hurt somebody. His name is Fritz Haarman, this and that. And the police, because he was a good informant, completely ignored the father's repeated appeals to have his son locked back up because he was afraid of what his son was capable of. And, unfortunately, it sounds a little bit like what we have today. So let's get into...
there's just a little bit more I want to go through here.
Yep.
After his death, this is really interesting factoid. Fritz Haarman's head was preserved in formaldehyde and given to the medical school in Göttingen, and apparently it's still there. The remains of his victims that were discovered in the river are buried in a mass grave in Stockton Cemetery. And although the people of Hanover, especially, and Germany in general, were eager to get past Haarman's horrifying crimes, his crimes inspired the German expressionist filmmaker Fritz Lang's 1931 classic thriller M. And in that movie, both police and criminals in a large German city hunt for a serial killer who preys on young children. And just the other tragedy through this, although easy for me to say, homosexuality was illegal in Germany at the time, it had largely been tolerated for some years. But with the lurid stories of Haarman and Grans, his pimp lover, sexual violence and sickening cruelty, a fresh wave of homophobia swept through the country. And as the hearts of most Germans hardened toward the plight of gay men, the path was cleared for the later campaign of murder against homosexuals that was carried out by Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. Hans Grans, like I said, he was paroled. That was the lover. However, he survived to a ripe old age and died in Hanover in 1975.
I want to cover the next guy, but we have some people we've got to say hi to, I think. And that is really crazy, that wave of hysteria. I mean, the reason it's so nuts to me, all of this information, is because how long ago it happened and how similarly I could see things playing out today in 2021 right here in the United States. Layla and Gaz, hello to Dylan, and good night to Lisa.
Yeah, Dylan, Lisa, thank you for listening in. Layla and Gaz, thank you for letting listen. I don't know, this might not be the best thing for them to listen to, but hopefully they're young enough that they won't be scarred for life by.
Yeah, my son listens to it because he has no idea. For some reason, the only thing that ever stuck out to him was Ted Bundy, and he knows Ted now. He knows the car when I watch, because I watch a lot about Ted Bundy. I've got to admit, I've got a little girl crush on Ted Bundy. But the thing is with RJ, it's like when we first started going to my sister's house, after a while, it was in October or September. So she had all these animatronics up, a giant Pennywise, a giant Nightmare Harvester, a giant Krampus. And I mean, they're huge. And my son is little. I mean, he's a tall kid, but he's not that big. So what I would do is when he would get scared by these things, my sister and I would just laugh and say, oh, look at that nice boy over there. Look how funny he is with his glowing red eyes and evil laugh. So now, like when I showed my son the Grinch Christmas time, he would be like, bad man, ha ha. He thinks that evil people laugh and that they're funny. So if he sees something that scares him on TV, he'll make like this he'll go ha ha ha, like this silly laugh, and not really be too scared, because even though he's scared, he thinks it's supposed to be funny, because that's what my sister and I taught him. It's weird, but I'm telling you, it prevents him from being scared of what I'm watching. He'll be 3 in July. I don't know when that's going to change, but.
Oh, well, one little thing I wanted to add here. I said they still had the head preserved in formaldehyde. Actually, they got tired of keeping it around because it was kind of gruesome by that point. And in 2015, they cremated it. So
I can't even imagine. I'm just psyched about the next guy, because it's just, I don't know. Throughout my whole childhood, throughout my life, I was introduced to horror movies at a young age, and I've been obsessed, with true crime and all that ever since the first book I read. But I've been even more obsessed and kind of enthralled with, infatuated with vampire culture. I love all vampire movies. I love all vampire shows. Not all of them. Like, I don't watch Buffy, but like, I think to myself, like, wow, one day they are going to, quote, come out of the coffin, and I can't wait, because I'm going to be one, and this obsession with New Orleans and this crazy stuff. My mom has it too. My sister has it. So James Riva is so interesting to me. He claimed to hear the voice of a vampire before he shot his grandmother 4 times in the spring of 1980. He then tried to drink her blood from the wound in attempts to achieve eternal life. Finally, he set her corpse on fire. He claimed his actions were in self-defense and that he drank her blood while he was sleepwalking. He believed that everyone around him was a vampire and that he needed to do something to be like everyone else. He was told, I guess that by this vampire in his head, he was told that in order to be like everyone else, he needed to kill someone and drink the person's blood. Then the vampires would throw a celebration party for him. Riva arrived at this delusion from progressive mental illness, coupled with a helpless family and a medical system that didn't have proper procedures to deal with him. So this was when he did this to his grandmother. It was on April 10th in 1980. He was 23 years old, and he beat her while she was in her wheelchair, his grandmother, and he used gold painted bullets and he used dry gas as the accelerant. She was 74 years old, and it was a tragedy because she was really one of the only people in her family that took care of him at this point. He was so mentally broken down, and nobody knew what to do with him. So later on in his trial, his lawyer presented what's still considered one of the strangest criminal defenses in Massachusetts history, when he pled not guilty to murder by reason of insanity and asserted that his grandmother was a vampire who was going to kill him by drinking his blood while he slept. So voices had told him that he would die unless he killed his grandmother. He was most likely afflicted with some type of mental illness, possibly paranoid schizophrenia, but I'm not a doctor, so I can't say that. His counsel openly stated that Riva had killed his grandmother, but he did not believe he was criminally responsible and should be placed in a mental institution. He had a long history of mental issues, and his parents were pretty ordinary, right? I'm going to let you get to the crime. I just want to give the background. His parents were ordinary people. His father was an engineer. His mother was an astrology teacher. Riva interpreted astrology as witchcraft. He claimed that his mother abused him, but his accounts varied, putting the claims in doubt. At 5 years old, he developed pneumonia, and during this time, he would draw pictures of bloody needles and open wounds. He became enraged by something his father had done and rigged a mechanism that intended to hit his father in the head with a hammer. And his depictions of death became so graphic that one of his teachers notified his parents. And at 13, this is when the fantasizing, about vampires drawing pictures of violent acts began. He began eating things that possessed a blood-like consistency. He killed animals and drank their blood right from their corpse. He punched a friend in the nose and tried to spear another in order to procure blood from them. He claimed to have attacked strangers to get blood, but he didn't want to kill anyone. He kept an axe by his bedroom door. He told the psychiatrist that he was going to kill his father. And one other thing I want to go over is after he told the psychiatrist that he was hearing male voices that warned him to watch out for vampires, he was diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenic, but he went through several hospitalizations but failed to recover, especially being that he kept drawing blood from the other patients. His family was terrified of him, so he went to live with his grandmother. That's why I said it was like more tragic, because she was the only one who wasn't afraid of him. When he lived with his grandmother, he decided that she was using an ice pick to draw his blood from him while he was sleeping. But she was an invalid in a wheelchair, and he also believed she was poisoning his food. And he really was convinced that day that his grandmother was going to kill him.
Yeah, just typical paranoid schizophrenic behavior.
Yes.
Everybody's out to get me. They're poisoning me. They're watching me. They're doing this.
My ex was one, and I lived with it for almost 5 years. Believe me, it's hard, especially when they're not diagnosed. I didn't know what the heck was wrong with the guy.
Yeah. And again, they had indications, as far back as 1975, 5 years before he shot his grandmother, that, he had some serious problems. And they believe that this diabolical plot, if you will, to slaughter his grandmother was a culmination of a whole series of bizarre incidents in his life that just kind of stacked on one another. And then like dominoes, it all came out. Like you mentioned, he liked to draw the horrific pictures. That was kind of how he started, then moved on to killing and drinking the blood of animals. Then he just eventually snapped. Now, he did give 2 separate stories when confronted about his crime. He told his mother that he was a vampire and would gain strength from drinking his grandmother's blood. And he also told the psychiatrist, like you're mentioning, that his grandmother was a vampire and came to feed on him during his sleep. And he believed that he was satisfying his masters or superiors in the netherworld of vampires by making a human kill. And he told them that he honestly thought that if he killed enough people, everybody who was bad to him, he would come back as a handsome man and have a car and girls, and his life would be fine. And we'll talk a little bit more about him. But at the conclusion of his lengthy trial, the jury only deliberated for 3 hours, found him guilty of second-degree murder. He was also found guilty of arson because he tried to burn his grandmother's corpse, and also assault and battery on one of the arresting officers. He showed no emotion at the reading of the verdict, and the Judge Brady, who was presiding over the case, sentenced James Riva, also known as the schizophrenic vampire and the Marshfield vampire, to life imprisonment in Walpole State Prison in Massachusetts on the murder charge and concurrently added 10 to 20 years on the arson charge. Let's go ahead and go to break here, folks. I'm not sure what we've got coming up. If there is some merch on the screen, buy it. It's what you need. You need a mug to put your
Good night, Unseelie.
your gerbil milk in that you buy from
Jarvis over
Jarvis. Yep. So we'll be back right after these commercial messages. Right after this word from our sponsors.
there. There you go. Attention, the following presentation is intended for mature audiences. Please listen responsibly.
And I believe we're back. I like that message there. Watch responsibly. I dropped a link there to Gemma's YouTube channel. Subscribe or get your tracheas bit down.
That's what I was just laughing at. I was like, wow, that happened.
And I dropped a couple links there to my new book. It's in Kindle and paperback. National Park Mysteries and Disappearances. I think we showed the cover last time, last Wednesday. It was published on Thursday, which I didn't know it was coming out that soon. And by Friday, it had already gone to #1, both as a new release and in at least one of its categories. It went to #1 in camping and travel, and then again in occult and unexplained mysteries or something like that. But it's out there. It's live. It's doing really, really well. And thanks to everybody who bought a copy. If you bought it, enjoy it, please leave me a review and a rating on Amazon. I appreciate that. Do Steve a favor here. Later on, I'm waiting on them to send me my author copies, and I will be giving away some of those at some point. I don't know how we're going to do that yet, but I'm gonna sign some and give them away.
Sorry, I had to close my window.
Sure that doesn't sound like a coffin or something
Yeah, I
closing here.
probably could have muted my mic. I apologize,
Yeah, no, it was cool. I like the sound. I thought it was a sound effect they were playing. That's what I thought it was like.
guys.
Somebody coming in or out of a coffin. Now, since you are a Twilight fan, a Twihard or a Twitard, depending on how you look at it,
Uh-huh.
the exterior of Bella's house is here in St. Helens, where I live. I've driven by there lots of times.
Is it really?
Now, just the exterior, yeah. And St. Helens is also known as Halloween Town. If you've ever seen the Disney Halloween Town movies, they were filmed right here in St. Helens. Every year in October, the whole town takes over to celebrate Halloween, have a month-long celebration. They have a haunted walk. They have a lighting of a great pumpkin, um, and then culminates with the Halloween parade. And the girl that played Marnie, I don't know what her name is, she comes to town and is the grand marshal for the Halloween parade. People take Halloween more seriously here than they do Christmas, and huge decorations in their yards and stuff. And I didn't know that when I moved here. I just picked here, but it's awesome. It is a beautiful
So
area in the Columbia River. But
one
yeah,
more
you can get your picture made in front of Bella's house if you come here.
one more thing I just read. It says it is said that James Riva is a clinical vampire suffering from delusions and the belief he could become a real vampire if he kills enough people or drinks enough blood. So
Well, there is a medical condition that makes people crave blood, and it has something to do with I think it's like an iron deficiency or something like that. But they will crave bloody meat, and I
right.
guess you can extend that to bloody humans.
When I
Blood's
was
blood.
pregnant and seriously anemic, like 2 times, I craved like really like rare, almost raw meat. It was really bad. And my one son, I craved cigarettes, and I didn't even smoke. So,
Yeah.
all right. So we've got Richard Chase, the vampire of Sacramento, and his classification is actually a spree killer. He had mental illness, and he was a necrophiliac, a cannibal, and he dabbled in mutilation. 6 victims from December 77 to January 78. And his, I can't make this up, his date of birth is May 23rd, 1950. So he would be a Gemini, which, no offense, but I kind of see that. Sentenced to death on May 8th, 1979. So, and he took his own life with prison doctor prescribed antidepressants that he had been saving up for the last few weeks, and he did this the day after Christmas in 1980. His name was Richard Trenton Chase, and he killed 6 people in the span of a month. So he was born in 1950, raised in a strict religious household, and was often beaten by his father. And in his teens, he became an alcoholic and developed a penchant for killing and mutilating small animals and fire starting. So we know now in 2021, especially in this community, that those are definitely early warning signs. All common traits among serial killers in their youth, like I just said. In high school, he had a handful of girlfriends, but he was never able to maintain a steady relationship because he had some dysfunction going on down there, and he couldn't get it working in the presence of females. So upon consulting a psychiatrist, he was told that the root of his problems was either repressed rage or mental illness, but he didn't seek any further treatment after this diagnosis. And he had an aversion to conventional sex and could only achieve arousal and, finishing up through violent or disturbed acts, such as killing animals and or necrophilia. He moved in with his mother, but began to accuse her of attempting to murder him via poison. Again, the delusions of being poisoned. His father purchased an apartment for him and forced him to move out of the house because they were getting scared of him. So as he was alone with obvious mental illness and violent fantasies, living in his new apartment by himself, he began to capture, kill, and take the bowels out of various animals, and then he would eat them raw. Guys, this is nasty. He then began to put parts of their insides into a blender, and he would make smoothies. And he reasoned that by drinking these smoothies, he was preventing his heart from shrinking. He feared that his heart was shrinking, and if it shrank too much, it would disappear, and then he would die. In 75, he was involuntarily committed to a mental institution after he had blood poisoning, and he contracted contracted this after injecting rabbit's blood into his own veins.
Ugh.
He escaped from the hospital again, went home to his mother, and was apprehended again and sent to an institution for the criminally insane. In 1975, that's a bad thing. He shared with the staff fantasies about killing rabbits. He was found with blood smeared around his mouth, and they discovered that he had captured 2 birds through the bars of his bedroom window in the hospital, killed them, and then sucked their blood out. The staff among themselves started referring to him as Dracula, and after undergoing a battery of treatments involving psychotropic drugs, 1975, Chase was deemed no longer a danger to society, and in 1976, he was released into the recognizance of his parents, who remember or who feared him. His mother, deciding that her son did not need to be on anti-schizophrenic medication, weaned him off of it herself. A little bit more.
Mom.
Yeah, I'm almost done, and then you can get into the murders. His parents put him up in his own apartment again, and he began to capture, torture to death, and drink the blood of rabbits, dogs, now cats. On occasion, he even did it, killed and ate the neighbors' pets if he didn't like them. And at least once, contacted the neighbor by telephone to explain what he had done and why. And at the same time, he developed a fascination for firearms. He started purchasing handguns, and he became fascinated by the crimes of the Hillside Strangler. And he believed the Strangler was also the victim of a Nazi UFO conspiracy that he believed he was the victim of. So pretty bad mental illness. One day in 1977, Chase rang his mother's doorbell and greeted her by thrusting a dead cat in her face. He then threw the cat to the ground, knelt down, and opened it up with his bare hands and started smearing the blood all over his face while screaming at the top of his lungs, while his mother calmly returned into the house and didn't say anything to anyone about what happened. And last, on August 3rd, 1977, Nevada State Police discovered his Ford Ranchero lodged in a sand drift near Pyramid Lake, Nevada. Inside were 2 rifles, a pile of clothes, a bucket full of blood, and a cow's liver. The officers tracked him down, and he was naked when they did this and screaming in the sand, soaked from head to toe in the blood. When questioned, he claimed that the blood was his own and that it had leaked out of him through his flesh from a cut. And 2 days after Christmas in 1977, so about a year before he would die, he just didn't know it, he fired a .22 handgun into the home of a Sacramento woman, and a police search of the woman's home found the slug in her kitchen. No one was harmed or arrested for the incident. That all was leading up to his murder, but it was post-institutionalization behavior. Yeah. After he was institutionalized.
And then the fact that his mom just said that one time where she just calmly went back in the house. He's out there screaming and
that would totally
smearing the blood from a fresh killed rabbit. And then
I'd be like, well, this isn't happening.
And the interesting thing to me, where he had killed and ate the neighbor's pets and then called them and told, I would like to have been a fly on the wall for that phone call. Well, hey Bob, how you doing? This is Richard next door. Yeah, I killed a nature cat. I thought I might ought to tell you about it.
I killed Daisy. I killed Snarfles.
Well, he was obviously very sick and had some problems there, put it mildly. And he was one of the weirdest looking ones. I mean, he just looked the part.
He looks like he was put together from spare parts.
Yeah, definitely. Fritz Haarman, he was, German from that time, very stout, very almost rugged looking individual. And James Riva, he was almost handsome. He had the slick back hair and
in his own way.
He did have kind of a feral look and a prominent nose, but he wasn't just, fugly or anything. But this guy, like you said, he looked like he'd been put together from spare parts and then peed on or something. He just
and then lit on fire.
But yeah,
we are so mean. This isn't happening right
now. But his first murder, like you mentioned, December 29th, 1977. He fired the gun 2 days before Christmas, 4 days after Christmas, killed his first victim in a drive-by shooting, in apparent warm-up for the crimes he was planning on committing later. This time the victim was Ambrose Griffin, a 51-year-old engineer and father of 2, who was helping his wife bring the groceries inside. One of Griffin's sons reported seeing a neighbor walking around their East Sacramento neighborhood with a .22 rifle earlier in the week, and the neighbor's rifle was seized, but the ballistics test determined that it was not the murder weapon. However, it was determined that the .22 caliber weapon used to kill Ambrose Griffin was the same one used to fire the bullet in the kitchen of the Sacramento woman 2 days after Christmas. Second murder on January 11th, 1978. Chase asked a neighbor for a cigarette and then forcibly restrained her until she gave him an entire pack. Nicotine fit. 2 weeks later, he attempted to enter the home of another woman, but finding that her doors were locked, went into her backyard and walked away. Chase told detectives later that he took locked doors as a sign that he was not welcome, but that unlocked doors were an invitation to come inside. Keep that in mind. Lock your doors. While wandering around, he encountered a girl named Nancy Holden, with whom he attended high school. He attempted to get a ride from her, but frightened by his appearance, like we were talking about, she refused. He ambled on down the street where he broke into the home of a young married couple, stole some of their valuables, bizarrely urinated into a drawer of their infant's clothing, and defecated on their son's bed. The couple came home while Chase was still in the house. The husband attacked him, but Chase escaped. He continued his attempts to enter homes that he came across them until he came to the home of David and Teresa Wallen. David was at work. Teresa, 3 months pregnant, was in the middle of taking out the garbage and thus had her front door unlocked. Chase went in, surprised her when she came back inside, and shot her 3 times, once in the hand, which was determined to be a defensive wound, and then twice in the head, killing her. Ballistics later proved that this was the same gun used to kill Ambrose Griffin. Chase then dragged her body to the bedroom and had his necrophilic way with it post-mortem while repeatedly stabbing it with a butcher knife. And when he'd taken care of all that business, he cut the corpse open and removed several of her internal organs using a bucket to collect her blood, where he took it into the bathroom to bathe in. He also sliced off body parts, drank more blood that he had emptied into a yogurt container. And then before left, he went out in the yard, found a pile of dog feces, and returned to stuff it into the corpse's mouth and throat. Excuse me there, my throat's getting a little dry. Allergy season. You want to take over there on the third murder there?
Sure. Yes, I got you. Sorry, I was reading the chat. I was going to say to Dezombified about that in 2016, those women being biting and attacking people. I was going to say, yes, I remember that. The third murder, the mass murder. On January 23rd, 1978, 2 days after killing Teresa Wallen, Chase purchased 2 puppies from a neighbor, which he then killed and drank the blood of, leaving the bodies on the neighbor's front lawn. On January 27th, 4 days later, Chase committed his final murder, which also qualifies as a mass murder. He entered the home of 38-year-old Evelyn Myroth, who was babysitting her 22-month-old nephew, David. Also present in the home was Evelyn's 6-year-old son, Jason, and Dan Meredith, a neighbor who had come over to check on Evelyn. Evelyn was in the bath while Dan watched the children. He went into the front hallway when Chase entered the home and was shot in the head at point-blank range with Chase's .22 handgun, killing him. Again, this was the same gun used in the Griffin and Wallen murders. Chase then turned the corpses over and stole Dan's wallet and car keys. Jason ran to his mother's bedroom, where Chase fatally shot him twice in the head at point-blank range. On the way to killing Jason, Chase also shot David in the head. So he's just killing everybody. He entered the bathroom, fatally shot Evelyn once in the head. He dragged her corpse onto the bed, and he did some things to her simultaneously while drinking her blood from a series of slices to the back of the neck. The medical examiner reported an inordinate amount of his bodily fluids in the corpse's parts, indicating an unusual amount of him doing that. When Chase had finished, he stabbed her at least half a dozen times in her butt. The knife penetrated into her uterus. He stabbed her in a series of vital points on the body, which caused blood from her inside to pool into her abdomen, so that, of course, he could slice her open and consume the blood, and he consumed all of it. He went to retrieve David's corpse. He took it to the bathroom, opened the skull up, and started eating David's brains. Outside, while this is all going on, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time reading all of this. It's just, wow.
You want me to take back over?
I got it. I'm just like, if I'm a little off.
It's grim. This
hard.
is probably the darkest episode thus far.
This is bad.
This guy makes Albert Fish look like a
right. Outside, while all this is going on, a 6-year-old girl with whom Jason Myroth had a play date. So the little boy, Jason, knocked on the door and scared Chase. He ran out of the residence, stole Dan Meredith's car. The girl alerted another neighbor. The neighbor broke into the Meredith home where he discovered the bodies and contacted authorities. Upon entering the home, police discovered that Chase had left perfect handprints and perfect imprints of the soles of his shoes in Evelyn's blood. You can take over, Steve.
Okay. Chase, meanwhile, took David's corpse home with him, where he chopped off his little David and used it as a straw through which he consumed blood out of the body. He then sliced the corpse open and consumed several internal organs, made smoothies out of some others, and then finally disposed of the corpse, what was left of it after all that, at a nearby church. Now, after the Wallen murder there, the FBI agents Ross Warnpagel and Robert Ressler were called in to investigate. They compiled a profile of the killer. They determined that the killer would be tall, malnourished, a loner, physically unclean, and that most importantly, he would continue to kill. Now, is that spot on? That's why these profilers are so good at what they do. I mean, they know they get all this just from what they
looks like he was put together from spare parts.
Yeah, I think there's a supernatural element in that profiling. I think a part of it is a psychic ability and
Absolutely.
not just powers of keen observation, whether they'll admit it or not. Now, 5 days after what they were considering the mass murder, and after hearing the FBI profile, Nancy Holden contacted police saying she believed Richard Chase could be the killer. The police ran a background check on Chase where they came across his registration of, altogether now, a .22 caliber semi-automatic pistol. Detectives and a team of police went to Chase's apartment where they asked to speak with him. Chase refused. You can do that. You can refuse to speak to the police. However, they hid down the hallway and waited for him to leave, and then arrested him when he left his apartment carrying a blood-stained box. His parka and shoes were likewise blood-stained. Inside were pieces of shredded, blood-soaked wallpaper and the blood-soaked .22, which he had committed several of his murders with. Chase claimed that the bloody wallpaper and bloody gun were a result of his killing several dogs. Oh, like that's going to, make the cops change their mind. Oh, I was just killing dogs. When they performed first a search of his person, they also found that he was carrying Dan Meredith's wallet. So the detectives, along with Ressler and Vorpagel, performed a search of Chase's apartment, a more thorough search. They found the walls, floor, ceiling, refrigerator, and all of Chase's eating and drinking utensils soaked in blood. On the counter was the blender Chase used to make his smoothies. It was caked in coagulated blood and the rotting matter of internal organs. Inside the refrigerator, police found several animal body parts wrapped in aluminum foil, David's brain in a Tupperware container, and pieces of his body wrapped in saran wrap. I like the way they got the brand names in here. And several of, can you imagine the ad campaign for that? Tupperware, when, you want to keep your neighbor's brains nice and fresh. And several of Evelyn Roth and Teresa Wallen's internal organs. On another counter were several pet collars. On his kitchen table, he had spread out numerous diagrams depicting various aspects of human biology. In 1979, Chase stood trial on 6 counts of murder. In order to avoid the death penalty, the defense tried to have Chase found guilty of second-degree murder, which would result in a life sentence. Their case, however, hinged on Chase's history of mental illness and the lack of planning in his crimes, evidence that these were not premeditated. He was literally a spree killer. On May 8th, the jury found Chase guilty of 6 counts of first-degree murder. Defense asked for a clemency hearing in which a judge determined that Chase was not legally insane. Now, I don't know about that.
I don't know about all that either. But I told you, being legally insane, at least nowadays, only consists of knowing what it means that you're going to die.
Yeah. Well, like the guy we talked about that when they were taking him to the gas chamber and he was eating his last meal, don't you want your dessert? And he's like, no, I'll eat it after I come back.
Remember I told you that? He said, I'm saving it for later. And he was going to the electric chair. There's a great documentary on that. And I believe it's on Prime. I'm going to get the name of it and mention it in one of our later live streams. It's called Crazy, Not Insane. And it's, oh my gosh, it's amazing. They have this expert like 40 years. Yeah.
Some states have, like in Tennessee, they can't execute an inmate whose IQ test 70 or below, because they literally don't understand what's going on, what's happening to them. That's, if you remember the famous Rocky Top murders that I covered in this latest book, Tattoo Eddie, the perpetrator of those killings, couldn't be sentenced to death because they found out he had like an IQ in the 60s. But another inmate at Brushy Mountain Penitentiary, where he was at the time, took care of that for them and cut his throat with a homemade shiv. And that's one of the prisons that's empty now, and that they do a lot of ghost hunts and things in. So interesting. I've heard some just frightening EVPs from there. But anyway, they found him guilty of 6 counts of first-degree murder, asked for a clemency hearing, sent him to the gas chamber. Waiting to die, Chase became a feared presence in prison. The other inmates, including several gang members, aware of the graphic and bizarre nature of his crimes, feared him. Now, that's pretty bad when the meanest, baddest dudes in prison are afraid of you.
Yeah,
I guess if you're going to go in, that's the way to go.
And when you didn't even really go out of your way to make them afraid, he wasn't doing anything abnormal for him. I mean, this guy was, I've never heard of him before until I started the research for this. I want to dive deeper into him. Like, this guy was actually insane. Like, there's no
doubt about it.
No doubt. He wasn't putting on a show for anybody. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't like he started becoming insane and, area style doing handstands in the interrogation room.
You see that, like we talked about in our Lady Killers episode with Phil Spector. He had a pet cockroach in his jail cell that.
Yeah, like all of a
sudden he's crazy. He was crazy, I think, all along, and had a penchant for firearms. They were waving them in people's faces, which he'd exhibited several times. But he really tried to play up that crazy angle for
that sympathy. Ridiculous wig.
Yeah, which they wouldn't let him have, and he was an even odder looking person without it. I think.
I remember we talked about that.
But the other gang members and things, they were afraid of him, and according to prison officials, the other prisoners tried to convince Chase to commit suicide because they were so fearful of him. They were afraid to get close enough to him to even kill him. He also granted a series of interviews with Robert Ressler, which I've read some of those, during which he spoke of his fears of Nazis and UFOs, claiming that although he had killed, it wasn't his fault. He had been forced to kill to keep himself alive, which he believed any person would do. He asked Ressler to give him access to a radar gun with which he could apprehend the Nazi UFOs so that the Nazis could stand trial for the murders instead of him. He also handed Ressler a large amount of macaroni and cheese, which he had been hoarding in his pants pockets, believing that the prison officials were in league with the Nazis and attempted to kill him. Okay. On December 20th.
Fights them off with macaroni and cheese? I don't get it.
But then,
this guy is batshit.
Fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, day after Christmas 1980, a guard doing cell checks found Chase lying awkwardly on his bed, not breathing. And as we mentioned at the beginning, the autopsy determined that he had done it himself with an overdose of prison doctor-prescribed antidepressants that he'd been saving for the last few weeks. There was a movie in 1988 called Rampage that was very loosely based on Chase's crimes.
Well, if he knew to save up his medication, maybe he was getting smarter.
Maybe the other inmates told him to do
that. Yeah, because I was going to say his medication was working, and that's why he was able to come to that.
Save all your pills, man. Take them all at once. Yeah. But either way, how it worked. But to me, that's the most frightening part of it, that the other inmates in like a Supermax were afraid of him. I mean, that's the worst of the worst.
Said, through no trying of his own. Like, he didn't go in there looking for the biggest and baddest guy, and he didn't go in there bragging about. He was just bat poop crazy. Like, done.
You think about it. He could have walked up to a bunch of those. I will kill you and drink your blood, and they knew that he would do it.
The thing that got me is that he thought this whole Nazi UFO conspiracy thing, so he puts macaroni and cheese in his pocket. Like, that means literally, like, there's no possible way to connect that. None. He's nuts.
So,
and I don't mean that like people that have mental illness. This guy, I'm sorry, but he was violent. He was nuts. And it's unfortunate that, was this the one where his mother took him off the meds, or that he wasn't taking his meds? So it's unfortunate that these people didn't get the help they needed, because it might have saved some lives.
And I just want to say, if you do need help, if you are having suicidal thoughts or dark thoughts, call the Suicide Prevention Hotline, 1-800-273-8255. There are people out there that care, people that care about you. You matter. You matter to somebody. There are people that love you. if reach out, there's all kinds of help out there. There's people who listen to you.
What's a little bit crazy too is that's like the second or third week we've had to do that.
Well, I think it's a valid thing because there are people out there
Absolutely.
that are suffering. There are people that have problems. There are people that think nobody loves them and nobody understands them. And, if somebody had
I've
taken
been
the
there.
time to do that to Richard Chase, I don't think it would have made any difference personally, but it could have, if you got him in the right hands. His mother weaned him off his medications. If he had stayed on those medications.
That's what I was saying, because they said, I wasn't sure if that was him or the other guy, because I've been in the chat a lot, but it's like he was doing well on the medications.
Yeah, he was living in an apartment.
That's why he was released.
He was still eating pets and things. Well, I guess that might have been after they weaned him off. But anyway, he wasn't killing people. He was living on his own.
Right.
He was still doing the horrific
That's why
drawings
he was released,
and things.
They said because he got so much better.
I think something else that might have helped him would be a priest. There's almost a supernatural demonic element to some of that. And I think somewhere along the way, whether intentionally or unintentionally, he may have done some little ritual that opened up the doorway for dark things to enter him. I think that can happen because I've heard of people playing around with that and ended up in a dire situation. So this guy, he was obviously cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs to some degree, but it just got deeper and deeper and deeper. There could have been an intervention. It might have just prolonged it. Who knows? But I think a lot of those victims died needlessly. Just people slip through the cracks like that, in the mental health system.
This show did make me eat my scrambled eggs for dinner a bit more interestingly.
Put some ketchup on it and blood.
I'm not sure about this now. Fear the Great White, that was hilarious. The Bog's
official, yeah, that's a quote. Family can cause an unbelievable amount of permanent damage in the early years of development.
End quote. We ready to wrap up?
I believe that's going to do it for this episode. Season 1, episode 8 of Real Evil. I don't know what we'll have next time, but we'll have something dark
evil.
and something dark and
seriously, I got full body chills like 8 times. Everyone, good night. I love and appreciate all of you. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I know most of you that I've seen in here have. Please go over now and do it. I'm trying to get my first 1,000. And Dezombified, thank you so much. I love and appreciate you all. And
thanks for giving us this platform to stretch our true crime legs and take a walk on the evil side. Subscribe to Gemma. Check out what we do on Friday and Sundays over on Missing Persons and Mysteries. Friday night is Campfire Stories. We'll share stories with people, things and personal experiences and things that have happened to them. Fireside Chat is just Jim and I chatting, kind of like we do here, but in front of an audience. And I didn't mean that the way it sounded. Of course, we have an audience here. It's chatting, sort of like we do here, but when we chat together, planning for future episodes, but we're letting the audience interact with us. This isn't as much interactive here. We try to interact with the audience and stuff, but over there, it's full-blown interactivity with the audience, and that helps us plan what to do future. Yeah, I didn't mean it the way it came out there. Dezombified. It's kind of like what we do here, but with an audience. I didn't.
But it's funny because it's all the same people in here that are in our fireside chat. So
see a lot of the same people. We have people that follow us around. Maraid, Chris Jarvis, Rick Brab. They come to everything I do. I do midnight ghost stories at midnight. Starts at midnight Pacific. That's 3 a.m. for a lot of people. I do that on 13 past midnight. Had to think of which channel. And they're there with me all night, 5 nights a week. And then on up into the day. And I know they're 8 hours ahead and stuff, and there's a time difference, but no, I didn't mean anything by that, Dezombified. I was trying to say it one way and got around it. It's like what we do here, but with a different audience interaction. But we're happy to be here. We enjoy being with you guys. This is kind of a cool little club. We've kind of got our own little cult going on here, if you will. So, all right. Well, I think that's going to do it for Jim and I. As always, I love and appreciate each and every one of you. Gemma, thanks to you for joining me. Always great having you by my side when we venture down these dark rabbit holes. And I will see you all next week. Good night, everybody. Mwah. I love you. Steve Stockton, and I'm out of here.